Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, we're going to go into what it's like to have spent pretty much 30 plus years in the world of behavioral health and science, because sort of that is science, behavioral health and science and human services. We're going to understand what that's like, the pressures, the somewhat cases, or more or less the people that interacted with this young lady, and how even at the age of 40 felt a need of change, all the way from Idaho. I should call her the next fitness guru, because that's definitely another part of her life which she's going to talk about. I'd like to welcome to the show Jodi Smith. Jodi, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
What an array of accomplishments. But before we get into the human services and your life path with that particular service, tell the viewers a little bit about you. Did you grow up in Idaho? Like, who is Jodi Smith?
No, I did not grow up in Idaho. I grew up in Central California, Fresno in particular. We affectionately call that the armpit of California for a number of reasons that are very fitting. I went to college there. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology at Fresno State University. And then shortly after that, moved to Idaho. My parents had moved away while I was right after I'd finished college. My parents had moved away from the area and had moved up north. And I had an opportunity to come up here then. I was dating my now husband at the time, and we decided to make a leap of faith. And we came up to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. That was in 1992. So we have essentially spent our whole lives here. We raised our kids here. I started my career really here. And I'm very happy here. I love it. And yes, I've spent many, many years in behavioral health.
I still can't understand why you would leave sunny California, the beach life, to go to the further northern area. Like, what made your parents go there all the way from California?
So keep in mind, we were nowhere near the beach. We were in Central California. So we had two seasons. They were hot and fog. Mm-hmm. And hot was 115 degrees, dry heat. And fog was pea soup.
Okay.
So those were the two seasons. And my dad had retired. He'd had a successful business in California. He'd retired, and he wanted to move away. I don't think my mom did. My mom was very much a family person and wanted to stay with her family. But they moved, and it just made sense for us to go as well. California has a lot of wonderful things and a lot of not so wonderful things, as does everywhere. But I'll tell you, I could not live in a more beautiful place than I'm at right now. If you ever look up Coeur d'Alene, just look at the pictures. It is absolutely gorgeous. And we have 4 distinct seasons, one of which is coming up that is my least favorite, but that's okay.
Winter, spring, summer, fall.
4 distinct seasons. Yes.
So you get to a new location. How did the ideal of behavioral health come into play? What even triggered that particular career path for you?
So when I started college, my bachelor's degree, I was a journalism major. I wanted to be the next Barbara Walters. Okay. And a semester in, I realized I did not really want to do that. But I had taken a psychology course, and I loved the psychology course. I loved learning about the brain and why people do the things that they do. So I quickly changed majors and went into psychology. And the other thing that I realized was that people speak to me easily. they talk to me easily. Apparently I'm very inviting and accepting. And so people talk to me. So it was kind of a natural fit. And then when I moved to Idaho, I had my bachelor's degree. When I moved to Idaho, I decided to go back to school to get my master's degree in
Right.
counseling and human services.
What were some of the things like when you first entered the field? Did you have any idea on exactly what you was going to encounter? And then more importantly, what was your first job role and title and responsibility?
So my first job in the field was actually working at a group home before I moved away from California. So I worked in a girls' group home, and these were troubled youth, right? And that was challenging, but I really liked it. I mean, this sounds horrible, but human suffering is very intriguing to me, and I just don't want people to experience it. So it gave an opportunity to really kind of dive into these young ladies and what their childhoods were like and what their challenges were, and to try to help support them to make better choices with their lives. And then, after that, I had some jobs in the substance abuse arena. I didn't particularly love that. It didn't resonate with me. But working with abused women really resonated with me. So that was kind of where I landed, and where I did my personal best work was with women who had experienced trauma and were trying to live, effectively in spite of it.
You said that you can resonate with those women. How did you resonate with them? Did you suffer from some of the battered women syndrome, abuse, or what? How was your relationship to these women?
No, fortunately, I've had experiences of abuse. From a time I had a couple of experiences with sexual abuse as a child, and one as a teenager. So I had that experience, and I grew up in a family that was kind of challenging. Not and I had a wonderful, loving family. So not to take anything away from that. And I never really felt like I was encouraged and supported to be my best self. It was always, you can do more. Mm-hmm. Like example, I'd bring home an A on a test, and what my dad would say was, why wasn't it an A plus? So like chasing perfection. And so you couple that with, some negative experiences, it kind of helps you to identify with women who've had not similar experiences, different types of experiences, but the same type of feelings and the same types of challenges that come from it.
You mentioned sexual. Where did this come from? Did it come from outside sources? Was it from people in your family that you knew? How old were you when all this stuff was taking place? And more importantly, how long did you conceal this from, within yourself?
Yeah. Well, that is a really good question, because honestly, until recently, I hadn't even thought a lot about it. I really hadn't. I'd kind of stuffed it away, tucked it away. The first experience, I was very young. I was 5 years old. It was a family member. And I won't go into great detail, simply to protect that family member. We were both young, him not as young as me. And then another time was an acquaintance. And then the experience in my teen years was a friend. And, and honestly, I didn't place a lot of stock in it at the time. And now I'm realizing it had more of an effect on me than I thought it did.
What do you mean that it had more of an effect on you?
Well, it's just, I think with a lot of people who've had similar experiences and way more traumatic experiences, I think we can kind of compartmentalize it and stuff it and not give it the proper due in terms of importance and impact that it has on us. I think that's pretty common. But it creates a block in some ways. So I'm guarded in ways that I feel like maybe I wouldn't be otherwise.
So you knew your perpetrators pretty well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever confront him?
Mm-mm. No, no. When I was a child, when I was young, it was very shameful and very taboo. And I really, honestly, at the time, didn't realize that what had happened was wrong. I mean, each instance was a one time, and the first time when I was young, I wasn't the only one there. Um, and again, I won't go into too much of detail just because I don't want to, it's because it's a family issue, right? But I wasn't the only one there, so that led me to believe that it was okay.
So are you
So
saying that you was groomed, so to speak?
I wouldn't say it was groomed because it was only a one-time experience. I don't think that I was. I think it was an opportunity for someone to take, and they took it. And there were other people around who I think probably knew what was going on and didn't stop it, but they were also children as well.
How old were
So
you when this was taking place?
I was 5 at that time.
Okay.
5. Mm-hmm.
So there was other individuals also being exposed to what you had been exposed to.
Perhaps. I don't know the extent. I don't know the extent. I mean, being 5 years old, and I'm not entirely sure. And I've never talked to any of them about it. Never talked to any of them about it,
You
ever,
never
ever,
talked to
ever.
your mom or your dad about it? What had happened?
No. Mm-mm. No.
So knowing that, let me go back. How long did you keep this? How did you manage to keep this departmentalized inside you as you're going into your adulthood, and more so, you're going into behavioral health with, let's call it what it is. You got trauma that you haven't even addressed yourself, but you're going into a field to help others. How does that make any sense?
Well, it doesn't have to make sense necessarily, right? For it to be a reality. So I just kind of normalized it in a sense and minimized it more so. Really, really minimized it. And I think because I grew up, my mom was incredibly loving. She was a stay-at-home mom, took care of it. I mean, she drove me around for sports. She a super wonderful, amazing mom, and a wonderful father too. But again, we didn't necessarily talk about things like this. We never talked about good touch, bad touch, right? We didn't talk a lot about our feelings necessarily, which is a challenge for me now because I'm such a feeling and emotional and reactive type of person. But at the time, it was more like, just continue to do better, just continue to do better. Just I did sports. I always had to excel at sports. I always needed to do better, better, better. I needed to get excellent grades. I needed to, so that was how I channeled, I think, my experience. I took that into taking control and controlling my body and my achievements, if that makes sense.
Sounds like, and I'm not a therapist, but sounds like there was moments in your life that you had to have a lot of validation, not so much from you, but it seems like somebody in your family, maybe your mom or your dad, was pushing validation. I mean, what was it like? What was their childhood like? And then they put that on you because I'm listening to your story, and you're saying approval and validation and different words that more or less so doesn't resonate with you, but it resonate with your parents' approval to accept you. So am I wrong in what I'm hearing, or what here?
You're not wrong in what you're hearing. Yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting because my mom was always very approving and very kind and very loving and all of that. And we just didn't talk about, feelings very much, which is not uncommon in families, in lots of families. we just didn't talk about those things. I mean, I remember she shared with me that ironically, she had been sexually abused by an older cousin of hers when she was a young child. But I never did tell her about my experience. I just didn't. I was afraid it would crush her. I was afraid it would crush her. And I was really afraid of what my dad might do if he knew. I was really afraid of that. Because as much as my dad would drive me, as much as he would push me, he was also an amazing protector of me. So I did feel very protected. It's interesting how you
Do
can
you
have.
think that, I didn't mean to cut you off, but do you think because your dad, because you said that your dad would take an A and say you should have did an A plus and this and this and undervalue what you've accomplished. So do you think that your dad's attachment to you, had he known, would have changed his perception and his outlook on you?
No, I don't think so. No, I think it would have made him become an even greater protector. And that would not necessarily have been a good thing, because all through my career, so from the time I started my first business until just a few years before he passed, and he just passed a little over a year ago, he was always very involved in everything I did, very, very involved, always providing me with guidance, direction, directives, whether I wanted them or not, right? And because he wanted me to do well, because he wanted me to be successful. And I realize that now. And at the time, it was a little bit overbearing. So my fear was that.
You said you realize that now.
Yeah.
You heard what you said. You realize that now.
Yes.
Why didn't you realize that before?
Well, first of all, I'm very, very much like my father, and I'm very, very hard-headed. So there's that. I'm very, very independent. I like to make my own decisions. So I don't like to be told what to do, which makes me a horrible employee, right? I should never be an employee ever. So even though it was very directive. It was very much a directive. You need to do this. You need to do that. You don't know this. And it was from a place of love and protection. And I do realize that now, especially now that he's gone, or even the last few years when he was here, because I was able to see the real him when he was able to open up his vulnerable side, because his childhood was atrocious, absolutely atrocious.
What do you mean? Give me some insight.
Horrible abuse. And I don't even know all of it. He shared some of it with me, but I know that it was just the tip of the iceberg. But I know that he left home at the age of 14. His father was terribly abusive, and his mother was unable to protect him. He was the targeted problem in the family. He left and went into the Army early on. He boxed in the Army. I've lots of fights, proving himself, to be the strongest, the best, and all of that. And he was an incredible businessman. He had many, many successes, great successes, which I'm fortunate for now. And at the same time, while he was confident, he was also insecure. And I think you can be both. I think you can absolutely be both. So he always felt like he could do more and he should be doing more. And so he passed that down to me, which
did he protect you from your grandparents? Because you said he came from abuse. So the abuse had to come from his side of the family. Did he protect you from that? Did you know your grandparents? Were you close to him?
I never met my grandfather. He passed a year before I was born. So I never met him, and I know very little about him. And my grandmother, they were divorced at the time. My grandmother was very sweet and kind, and also very weak, meaning she was taken advantage of frequently by lots of people. So she didn't have the same level of resilience that you would hope someone would have to be able to stand up to others. She was a kind, wonderful, loving woman. She made the best spaghetti ever. I remember that. She was a great woman, but she wasn't very strong.
Mhm.
She wasn't very strong, so she didn't protect him, and she passed. Gosh, before I moved to Idaho, so I think she passed in 1990. So it's been a really long time.
You mentioned that when you got in this field, and I'll go back to the question. Um, what was your responsibilities when you first got into the behavior um, science career? What was your first job title, and what was your first uh, uh, title that you went in, and what was your roles?
Yeah, my first title was a gosh, youth counselor. I think was the title, and that was in the group home that I worked at before I moved to Idaho. And the next one was a substance abuse. Oh goodness, it was so long ago. Substance abuse. Oh, I'm not even remembering the name of it. But anyway, it was a substance abuse coordinator of sorts for a county, actually in Washington, nearby where I live now. And I just didn't love that. I didn't love that work, and it was a bit of a drive. So there was that. But when I went into my own work, I opened a social service mental health counseling agency. We provided mental health treatment, outpatient treatment, primarily to children, and then we branched more into adults and families as well.
So, how long did it take you to? Let me back up. When did the ideal of starting your own behavioral health services come into play, and why?
Okay, yes. So while I was going to school, actually, my husband and I owned a business. It was a sign business. We made signs for people, right? We made them, we installed them, all of that. And I liked working for myself. And also, my dad was an independent business owner my whole life. He owned multiple businesses, and so I saw that had been modeled for me. So I had the business that we started when I was going to school. Then I got my master's degree, went to work for someone else, and then I did have another job in between, a brief job in between, and I was doing psychosocial rehabilitation. So I was working one on one with clients, teaching them social skills and good health choices so that they could break free from the grips of behavioral health issues that they were experiencing. So very, very interactive one-on-one type of service. And what happened was that the company I worked with was restructuring. Restructuring can mean a lot of different things, but basically they were redoing everything. And I just decided at that point in time, I can do this. I can do this, and I can do it differently, and I think probably better, and have better outcomes. So that entrepreneurial, I've always had that entrepreneurial desire, and it's ingrained in me. I was born with it, right? It's in my DNA. So I knew at that point in time that was what I was destined to do. So I started the business and grew it and grew it and grew it and grew it and branched out and just never looked back.
What were some
So
of
that's
the
how.
big cases? What were some of the big issues that you had to take on for yourself coming from corporate America, but now trying to mirror that same concept into your own company? What were some of the things that you had to bring into your company that was lacking in corporate America?
Well, I think, corporate America is all about the dollar, right? And making as much as you can. And it's not so much about outcomes. And so my focus has always been outcomes. I want anyone who I come into contact with to provide a service to, whatever that service may be, whether it's behavioral health or fitness or whatever. I want them to acquire the skills where they can do this on their own. So
Right.
work yourself, the mindset of working yourself out of a job, because there's always going to be plenty of people behind them that need your services. And if you do a good job, then more people get better and society functions much more prosperously. Everybody does better when everybody's doing better, right? That basic concept. And I also believed in hiring, the best of the best that I could find and training them up to follow my principles and my philosophies, because I felt like I had a good set of principles and philosophies, and it worked really well.
When you say that, you just touched on something.
Mm.
You have what is called the standard in behavioral health that you have to employ with each client. I guess those are called the steps. but you just mentioned to bring in your values and so forth. What were you adding into what they were already, the standard protocol? What was you adding in?
That's a really good question. I'm going to have to think on that for a moment because, in behavioral health, we have best practices, right? Best practices, and I'm not licensed anymore, but, anyone who's working in the behavioral health field should carry and maintain the appropriate licensure. So we have ethics and standards that we have to abide by. So, to take it to the next level, I mean, honestly, it was just about our doing the job and doing it well and following the protocols consistently, and having starting treatment with the end in mind. Always start with the end in mind. Help this person across the way from you, across the room from you, identify how their life is going to be different. Have them visualize that, and then create a path for them to get there. Anything less is a disservice to the client. So that was always my mindset. And it wasn't always the mindset of the system or even the mindset of the therapist. I mean, I've just always believed someone who's coming to you for a service, you've got to provide them with the service. That something in their life should change significantly by way of receiving the service. And if it doesn't, you're doing a disservice. So hopefully that makes sense.
You mentioned that you found a stronger relationship with the women and the emotional traumas and so forth that women go through based on your own. And thank you for taking the time to bring your personal traumas onto the show and enlighten other individuals. With that said, what are at least 4 of the key issues that women have dealt with when it comes to trauma that has clearly reached an explosive epidemic that people are like, wow, I didn't even have no idea. Instead of 4, what are the top 5 things that you've witnessed over the course of your 30 some odd years in this field?
Well, I think it would be surprising to know how many adults are adult children, of alcoholics, so a lot of people have, dysfunctional family, childhoods, upbringings. I mean, every family is dysfunctional to an extent. I mean, we all are to some extent, some a little bit more so than others. And I think people outside of the behavioral health world would be really surprised to the extent of that. So, I mean, we saw a lot of things. I mean, but a lot of it was, issues related to family dynamics from early on, early childhood abuse, whether it was sexual, physical, emotional. A lot of adults who'd been in foster care, who hadn't had the connection to family. I think human connection, solid, genuine human connection, is by and large the biggest issue. Having the ability to connect to another human being who truly cares about you unconditionally and provides you with short support unconditionally. Sometimes meeting the therapist, that was the first time that ever happened for people. Mm-hmm. So, that's a really, the 5 top, it all goes back to some kind of abuse. It goes back to some kind of abuse or neglect, a lack of solid caring, when we're growing up. Those are the basic issues. If someone in your formative years, if you're missing that connection, it's hard to develop it. And then, of course, the other issue that we saw a lot was substance abuse. So women, men, women, whomever would become engaged in substance abuse at a young age, especially if they were still in the developmental years, maybe in their teens, and their development essentially stops at that point in time. So here they are, 35, 45, 50-year-old person, adult, who's maybe no longer using substances, but their brain is still back at that place where they started using. So that whole developmental process didn't take place. And that is painful for folks because they just don't understand why their relationships are suffering so much as a result. So I think there's just human suffering in general is something that people don't lay people just don't really truly grasp.
What about there's an explosion of even something more, I guess will fall into the area of behavioral health. And let's talk about a high increase of sexual addiction, where you have individuals that are now swinging and all kind of things. I mean, it has been blown out of, I don't even know if it's out of proportion, but there's been a lot of magnifying glass on this kind of action. What's your take on that? And did you see a lot of this in your time in the field?
So I'll tell you that I had clients who had partners who had sexual addictions. And I had a couple of clients who were in non-traditional relationships, swinging type relationships, or multiple partner type relationships, open relationships, I guess we would call them. And I think it all comes back to the need for validation, the need to be seen, and the need to be appreciated. It's fulfilling some kind of a need that is missing, right? I mean, people who've experienced, sexual abuse can go one of two directions. One being very closed off and very challenged when it comes to intimate relationships, and the other being very open, almost to the point of where they allow themselves to be victimized, although they don't see it that way, but allow themselves to be victimized over and over and over again, looking for something that has been missing in their lives. So yes, I experienced
take the actions of the swinging lifestyle and validate it or replace it as a sign of love, is what you're trying to say?
Way, yeah, right. A sense of belonging and acceptance. Yeah.
What do you consider? You said the word dysfunction. Give me your definition of the word dysfunction as it relates to behavior.
Well, so dysfunctional behavior really is, I mean, I see dysfunctional behavior as behavior that leads to negative consequences.
Okay.
They're right. I mean, because there are behaviors that are maybe detrimental, that don't necessarily lead to negative behaviors or negative outcomes, but then there are behaviors that do lead to negative outcomes. So, and people might interchange those. That's just my perception. But dysfunction is a lack of ability to function properly or optimally. So, so someone who has a drinking problem, like it's a problem if they're not able to get up and go to work in the morning, or they're not able to get through the day without a drink, then it is a major dysfunction. It is detrimental outside of that. Even if they're able to function, it's still detrimental to their health, but it's dysfunctional when they can no longer function the way that they need to get things done.
We see this. We see this pretty much every day with individuals that encounter our lives. The question that baffles me is it hard for individuals to realize they have these signs, symbols, and tokens?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, we can stuff it. I mean, just like I have with some of my previous experiences, you can stuff it and ignore that it exists and just pretend that it doesn't, but it's still back there, and it's still there, even if it's not in your conscious awareness. Even if it's not something you're thinking about every single day, it's still there. And a lot of people have shame and guilt about their behaviors. I mean, I know I've had shame and guilt about my behaviors. We all have.
Right.
Those times when we've kind of, right. I mean, we know what that feels like, to experience that shame and guilt and to be able to process it and to give yourself grace to pick yourself up and learn from those mistakes is really, really important. And some people just aren't at a place where they can do that.
Your life began to change and you got into the world of physical fitness. Why was your life, two-part question, what was your life going through that took you into reevaluating, walking away from that particular field and embarking into a new journey moving forward?
Well, so first of all, I've always been into physical fitness. I started lifting weights when I was 13 and I fell in love with lifting weights. And then of course, grow up, all the things, life and all of that. I continued to work out because I liked it. I liked the way that I felt. About 20 years into my career, 22 years into my career, I started to burn out. I just started to burn out. I had just kind of gotten to that place where the human suffering was just more than I could bear every single day. It just was taking its toll. And taking care of my staff was hard too. I mean, COVID was tough. It was tough on everybody. And when you're a caregiver or you are a provider who's providing support to others who are experiencing the same struggles that you're experiencing,
Right.
it's really, really hard to set that aside. So COVID really kind of did it for me. And because I love fitness, and I had prepped for a competition. So I did my first and only bodybuilding competition at the age of 52, which was right at the end of my behavioral health career, which I didn't realize at the time. But that is really what gave me the strength and the confidence to be able to retire from the career that I had known for so long. So through changing my body, building my confidence, feeling like I was freaking unstoppable, I realized that I was meant to do something else at this point in my life. And so I sold my part of my business, because it's a multifaceted business, but I sold that part of the business that I ran, and I went into fitness full time. And I got my certification. Well, I mean, I did my competition. I got my certifications. I opened a gym, and this became my second career because, again, I'm not a good employee.
Right.
Everybody else, but I needed to do something. And this was a way to give back and to support positivity in individuals that was different from the way I'd been doing before, but every bit, if not, in my opinion, more meaningful.
When you say to give back something that was different than before.
Yes.
What do you mean by that for the viewers? Explain the difference between that and what you're doing now.
So when I was doing behavioral health, we taught about self-care, how to care for yourself in a way that helps you to feel better, right? Things that you do to improve your overall well-being. We teach it, we preach it, but now I can demonstrate it. And now we have different tools to help people with their self-care, because we know that taking care of your body, moving your body, doing resistance training, eating properly, all of that helps you not only live longer, but it helps you live better. So it is a different way to give people the resources and the tools to really elevate their sense of well-being.
People will listen to this story and hear a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, hopefully to use in their own lives. What have you seen different in yourself and to the people that may have went down that road before with that the behavior side of treatment versus the exercise side, and really trying to combine both of them?
Yeah, I said you combine both of them because they're both important. And if you're struggling with things internally and issues of abuse, neglect, or anything else that has you stuck emotionally or mentally, that talk therapy is excellent. And taking care of yourself is going to help you additionally, and sometimes more. It just depends on what is ailing you, right? I know that for myself, building my body, my strength has changed my life so significantly, because now I'm not as reactive about things. I'm much more calm because I know that I can handle anything that comes my way. I don't feel bound up when I go to work at the gym or when I'm working with my online program. I don't feel that tension, that stress, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through the day today, like I did previously? in my other career. And I'm not going to say I didn't feel that way the whole time through that career. It was just mostly towards the end that I felt like, oh, I just can't do this today. Now I'm excited. I'm motivated. I love what I do. I love seeing people feel good. I love it when someone comes into the gym and they're like, I didn't want to come in today. And I'm like, oh, but you're here. And then on the way out, they're like, see you. I'm like, yes, right? Exactly. You feel so much better. And then the physical changes, all of that, the changes that they experience in their families, the changes experienced in their relationships, their ability to parent better, to deal with stressors differently, the health improvements, all of that, all of that, all of that is improved when you take care of yourself. So this is just one way to do that.
What do you say to somebody that goes through these burnouts in their career, in their relationship, in life, and continuously not recognize the situation and keep repeating the same habit or the same behaviors? What is the advice that you that's in this field would tell these individuals?
If you can't tolerate being a little bit uncomfortable, you're going to be stuck where you're at. It is through discomfort that change happens, and it is well worth it. And I will say too, evaluate how hard it is to stay the way it is right now. How bad do you feel? How bad do you feel right now? And what would it mean to you to feel better, to be out of this space where you're stuck? Are you willing to engage in the change that is going to take to come out on the other end? What would it mean to you to feel better? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, that was just it.
What should the viewers get out of this episode after listening to you and the fact that you devoted over 30 some odd years into the behavioral health science category, and now you've always been in the physical fitness aspect, but you shift over to focusing more on combining both of them. But what should they get from your story today?
Honestly, that without change doesn't happen. And if you can commit yourself to a mindset that is growth oriented, you can do anything. And the confidence that you build by doing things that are hard and coming out on the other end is invaluable. So hard is a perspective. It's hard to stay the same when you're uncomfortable. It's hard to get to another place, but you get to the other place and it's not so hard anymore. So, the old saying, choose your hard.
Jodi, how can the viewers reach out to you and support your cause? And definitely it's been a pleasure having you come onto the show, but how can the viewers reach out to you?
You can reach out to me. You can email me at Jodi at shiftfitnesspf.com. And you can also reach me through Instagram, Jodi Smith, and Facebook, Jodi Smith as well.
Thank you so much for taking time out to come and share such a beautiful story. I wish you all the success moving forward. You definitely are an inspiration to the individuals that have suffered some type of trauma. I suggest that you guys reach out to her no matter what it is. No trauma is too small, but it can be addressed. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.